Hola, everybody. Yo me llamo Jessie Feliz. My name is Jessie Feliz. I'm a Spanish language educator. I am a professional learning experience facilitator. I'm a mama. I'm a sister. I'm a daughter. I'm a cousin. I am a human, just like all of you all. And so I'm super duper to be here. Gracias a Bridget por la oportunidad. And I want to honor our time so we can get into it. And let's just go ahead and get right started with it. So thank you. If you can let us know in the chat box if you are able to see the presentation screen. Let us know in the chat box. Bridget, are they able to see it? I'm not able to follow right now on Facebook. Ellos dicen que sí.
Yep, everyone could see it.
Okay, perfectísimo.
Good.
Bueno, so welcome, and we are working together, Jessie Feliz LLC.com, working in conjunction with Duolingo for Schools. So thankful again for la oportunidad to facilitate this professional learning experience. So we are talking about pause and process. You can call me a language teacher nerd or a language learner nerd. It doesn't offend me. I'm so excited because we can really dig deeper so we can reach further. And it's all about supporting and increasing this cognitive engagement in our world language classroom. So briefly, here's the workshop flow. One, we have to talk about the rationale. And I know sometimes we're like, oh my goodness, I don't want to just hear about the scholarly research. Everything that we're doing is practical. Everything that we're doing is foundational. But if we skip that first part, then it's not going to set us up for success to actually implement this pause and process learning cycle. We're going to briefly talk about information processing as it relates to our task as language educators. We're going to practice a strategy in action where I will do a mini chiquito lesson using this practice, I'll say, teaching Kiswahili. I purposely didn't want to do Spanish because I know everyone's like, well, a lot of people know it. I don't know enough Francés, but I'm learning Kiswahili through the Duolingo app. Shout out to Duolingo. But I'm using this practice. I don't really want to call it a strategy. It's a practice. I'm using this practice of pausing and processing along my own language learning journey. And we'll briefly reflect, share. There will be a few announcements, and if there's time for Q&A. So the underscore of everything is that we want to humanize the language learning experience. Whether you are creating your own curricula yourself, whether your school district has provided you with a textbook curriculum, or whether you are capitalizing on the amazing app called Duolingo. We have to humanize. That's like the denominator. We have to humanize this language learning experience, and we have to do it together. And that's what we're going to be talking about. So when we come back to that is like the root behind everything. Let's humanize this language learning experience. So in the name of humanization, right? What is a favorite memory from your own language learning journey? I'm going to ask you all if you want to type it in the chat box, or if you're watching this on the computer, take your cell phone and scan. I use Padlet like todo el tiempo, all the time. So I would encourage you all to do the same. You can have up to 5 Padlets for free, and then you can download them or save them so you don't have to pay. But it's a great tool. You're going to utilize that now. So it's really cool if you can watch this on your computer so that you can use your cell phone to scan. Bridget, if you are able to, I just thought about it, if you can scan and then put in the comments, if you're able to on Facebook, the direct link for Padlet, if you're able to do that.
Okay.
I just thought about, I should have had those links for you because some people may be on their cell phone in the comments, right? All right, so I always like to have timestamps, and everything I do, I try to model best practices, utilize those timestamps. But I want to briefly share with you all a favorite memory. And favorite doesn't always have to mean, something, un recuerdo bueno. It may not always be the best situation, but part of humanizing his language learning journey is sharing these memories, school age and age appropriate, right? With your students so they can learn that, hey, she's human too, he's human too. We're all working together along this language learning journey. So I remember cuando yo era estudiante de intercambio, when I was an exchange student in Costa Rica in 2005, in 2005, we had to do a presentation. I attended La Universidad in Berritas, and we had to do a presentation. And I was really nervous. I was like in front of people. It wasn't just people from my school. There were like over 100 students, exchange students. And I was just like bien nerviosa, right? And so I got up. It was like I was the person next in line to share my narrative with the class. And this was like week 1 of being in Costa Rica and attending this advanced level Spanish class. And so all of a sudden I turned to my professor because I kind of froze and I said, "Estoy embarazada." And she said, "¿Cómo?" And I said, "Estoy muy embarazada, profe." And the whole class heard me start laughing at me. And I'm thinking, OMG, how rude are these international students with me? Well, I was saying that I was embarazada. I was trying to say I was embarrassed. I felt embarrassed or nerviosa, but I was actually saying I was pregnant because embarazada is one of those false cognates where it looks and kind of sounds, suena como embarrassed, but it does not mean that you're embarrassed. And so that's an example. I like to share that with my students, different memories, again, school appropriate, age appropriate, especially when we're learning cognates. You know, you want to make it aligns with the learning objective for what you're doing because that humanizes it. It doesn't make it like, oh, this teacher is such an expert that I'm so far spread apart from this individual. So for our first plushie, I'm going to set the 60-second timer if you haven't had a chance to contribute. For our first giveaway, Bridget, you want to take it away if we had some people to start contributing on the Padlet?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're giving a plushie away for those who are sharing a favorite memory from your language learning journey. So on Padlet or on the comments, Jessie, would you like me to choose one of them?
Yes, yes, por favor, because I'm unable to see right now.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, absolutely. We've had a lot of really good ones.
Can you read one out loud?
Oh yes, Lake. Listening to podcasts on my commute and going from needing to slow the audio to 0.8 to being able to speed it up to 1.2. I love that. I love the fact that you're listening to podcasts on your commute, really making good use of that time. Make sure you DM me, Lake, so I can get you your plushie.
Yes, yes, please, por favor. And this is sign language for congratulations, felicitaciones. And that is an amazing memory, not just memory, maybe current, it could be past. Share that with your students. And then also, how awesome would it be for you to model for them, like changing the speed and how, that's humanizing it, like making it where we're all in this together. So part 1, we're going to briefly talk about instructional design, briefly, muy chiquitito, but we have to talk about this because again, this is foundational principle that's going to take us to the pause and process. So when we're thinking about creating or writing our lesson plans, I want to encourage us to embrace this design thinking component. But oftentimes we're thinking, of course, about what knowledge and skills the kids need to know, vocabulary, grammar. We're thinking about how it needs to align with state standards. We're thinking about different activities the kids will do for practice. And of course, we have to plan backwards. So we're thinking about the assessments. However, there's this component, and if you can see it very in the back right here, la U, that U. That U stands for understanding. And that's the part, not understanding as a verb, but understanding as a noun. What understanding do I want my scholars to develop, to construct as a result of learning these knowledge and skill sets, right? Because understanding understanding is key. Zaretta Hammond is the author of a very popular book right now in the field of education, Culturally Responsive Teaching in the Brain. If you have not read this book, por favor, check it out. She says processing information for understanding is very different from simply remembering facts. Wiggins and Matee, also amazing scholars who created the understanding by design, the backwards planning philosophy. They say without lessons designed to bring ideas to life, concepts remain empty phrases to be memorized. Phrases to be memorized, depriving learners of the realization that ideas have power. Hay poder de ser bilingüe. There's like power in being bilingual. Like we really want to equip our kids so they can do this last part, transfer the skills, not just be robots and press this and do that and just compute. No, we want them to be embraces that learning with understanding is more likely to promote transfer than simply memorizing information from a text or a lecture. And we all have been guilty. I put my hand, if I lift my legs up, my toes too. I'm right there with you. We're humanizing this experience where sometimes we feel under the pressure, as we get from No Se Habla de Bruno, from Encanto, right? You may feel this pressure of, oh, I have to accomplish all these things, but we don't want to just cover. We really want to empower students so that they can construct their own understanding. So aquí es un ejemplo. Before we get more into the pause and processing, hashtag understanding, hashtag transferability, and please escribe tus comentarios, write whatever comments, questions that you may have in la chat box, and we will attend to them as we go along. So during a brief segment with my students in the summer program, I used Duolingo, and I want to pause. You may use Duolingo for the input. You can use your traditional curriculum for the input. It can be teacher created. I'm just giving you this example today using Duolingo, okay? So this is not specifically for Duolingo, pero es un ejemplo. Here's an example for us. So students learned the vocabulary for this specific lesson. Yo soy una niña, I'm a girl, tú eres niño, you're a boy, la mujer, woman, el hombre, man. And they learned that. I took those cognates that we did not learn from Duolingo and I added them, such as importante, especial, inteligente, creativo. I gave them additional words after we did guided practice together, before they had a chance to work independently on the app. I did this, and then afterwards, here's an example of allowing the student to then construct, to transfer skills separate from what the direct input was. Make sure I'm sharing the sound as well. Un momentito. Share sound. Okay. Oh, it's not playing. I don't know if that's a glitch, Bridget, with us being on Zoom or Facebook. For some reason, it's not playing. It was playing earlier. Well, in this instance, I just can briefly model it for you. I'm sorry about that, everyone. What's happening is I gave sentence strips. This did not take a lot of extra planning. This was not, I mean, as far as time-wise, I still have to be very intentional when I'm designing this lesson. I went through and said, this is lesson 1. And then I cut out strips of different cognates. And then I wish you all could hear it. I'll have to tag it and share it later on, Bridget, where you can hear the young lady reading, yo soy niña, yo soy importante, yo soy especial. She was able to transfer from yo soy, which was the input from Duolingo, to now let's practice and process separately. That's what we're talking about, the understanding. So you can answer this in the chat box. We'd love to hear your responses, or you can write it down. I want to honor both introversion and extroversion, right? How do you right now incorporate information processing into your lessons? What do you do? We're gonna take 60 seconds for that. How do you incorporate? And yeah, I think when you go live for some reason with Facebook, it's not letting me press play for some odd reason. Yo no sé. I don't have this issue with regular Zoom. Might be a Facebook glitchy. But how do you incorporate it?
I can confirm that it's a really amazing video. It's so sweet. And I think you had posted it in the Educators Network a month or so, but it was, yeah, amazing to see that that live.
Yes, oh yes, I did post it in the video, and that it was like a reel that I made, and she was one of the people featured. Yes, so Bridget, do we have any comments right now that are being generated about how do we incorporate information processing right now?
Yes, let's take a look. With Flip, video recording app allows students to share their voices their way. I think you've told me, Jessie, that you love using Flip, right?
Flipgrid, yes, Flip. Oh, it's Flip now, but that's a cool way to say it. Flip. Flipgrid. Yes. Flip. Yes.
Yeah. Other than that, sketch notes. Students create notes and drawings to share their learning.
Yes.
Never heard of sketch notes. Cool.
Yes.
Pamela says, I'm going to be experimenting with tweaking some Harvard Project Zero thinking routines this year.
Okay.
Amazing.
Love it.
Everyone. Thank you. Keep sharing in the chat.
Yes, por favor. And so it's very important that we are intentional, that it's not just impromptu. And look, we're all teachers. Sometimes there will be those impromptu moments, right? Pero we want to like intentionally plan diariamente, every single day, for students to be able to process. I think sometimes we think about practice as processing after the new information is being taught. However, processing is not necessarily practicing. And so this is what we're going to pause and have an opportunity to dig a little deeper. So now we talk about instructional design, that we really want to focus on the understanding, which you only will acquire the understanding after learning the knowledge and skills and practicing feedback, all of that. But again, we want to like not focus so much on the traditional testing structures where we are not cultivating understanding. So let's talk about information processing. It's muy básico. Everyone, if you're taking your notas, please, I hope you're processing this well. And disclaimer, if you do not have a sheet of paper, if you can grab it, we're going to be using this pause and process method in very briefly to learn some Kiswahili. So our brain, there's basically, according to neuroscience, there's basically three main components. I know we talk about long-term, short-term, working memory. Basically, when it comes to processing new information, there's input, however you receive it, elaboration, and then application. Como profes, as teachers, we are, especially as world language teachers, we are the bomb.com when it comes to that input. We differentiate the way that we present. We use audio, we use video, we use tactile, we do TPR, we use visuals, we have props. I mean, we are amazing when it comes to differentiating that input. And some of us are really developing our skills for application, having performance-based demonstrations of understanding, in addition to more conventional assessments, informal, and formal exit tickets. However, the part that I want us to give a little bit more soul to, intentional soul and practice, is this elaboration. And this is where the pause and process comes in. Elaboration, this is Zaretta Hammond, the same author of The Culture Responsive Teaching in the Brain. And I love that book because it focuses so much on the neuroscience behind how we process. Elaboration makes material memorable and meaningful. The elaboration stage is where learning for understanding takes place. If we are only so focused on the way that we introduce new material, and then so focused on the assessment, which would be the application, and don't honor and create and almost make it like a sacred practice in our classes of this elaboration period, of this pause and process, then we're missing opportunities to coach students in learning how to like be independent thinkers so that they can actually understand and make understandings happen. And this is what is so amazing. And I know we're in this era of tecnología. And again, I love Duolingo as an educator as well as a language learner. I'm using it again para aprender Kiswahili, to learn Kiswahili, and I'm going to model how I would use that with you all shortly. At the same time, whether it's textbook, online curriculum, teacher-created curriculum, Duolingo, or whatever other input source, there is tactile feedback. There's some neural circuitry that only occurs when you process. I forgot who it was, Bridget, in the notes that said they use an app called like SketchUp or something. There's something that only happens with the hand and brain complex, and that's called tactile feedback. When you have pen and paper, right, and you are actually not just taking notes, long hand notes, but actually doodling that relates, making connections, ideating, writing out your wonderings, expressing yourself, that's the pause and process. So this is an overview of the pause and process learning cycle. And I love referring to this, coming back to this, holding myself accountable to this. So step one, we know there's always the input of new introduction. This may be your students independently working on a Duolingo app. This may be you teaching a lesson in conjunction with it or a separate curriculum. Before we get to practicing, we have to pause and do step 2 and 3. They work in tandem. We have to pause and process with this tactile feedback, this hand-brain complex, right? We know learners need to process this information through guided practice. Oh, I love guided practice with Duolingo. I want to encourage all of us to start operating in that. Let me tell you briefly. Guided practice is instead of just assigning students to work independently on their own, guided practice looks like you projecting it on the screen. And if you have a webcam, or if you can just model it on the board somehow with them while you all are learning it together. And again, practice yields permanence. It's not about perfection, right? So what are we permanently etching? So you project this on the screen, you are modeling that metacognition. You're modeling what you are thinking as you are processing, and you can, as a whole group, process together. With younger learners, I love doing this. With my older learners, I love modeling this for them so that they are held accountable to do this while they are working independently on tasks. And they can also do this in small groups. Teacher feedback has to be interwoven. Checks for understanding, interwoven. Chunking and chewing, all those strong teaching strategies have to be interwoven with this. But it's you honoring this pause and process. Then let's be creative, right? That's part of the swag. Study, be creative. Practice with feedback. Study, be creative. Do a whole class review, because you're not just sitting at your desk grading. I know, I'm not judging. We all been there, done that. And some days it is what it is. But instead of just like isolating yourself, you are circulating during this pause and processing, and less of giving direct yes or no corrections, and more so, let me facilitate these content connections. Let me cue you. Let me prompt you. Let me ask you questions in return. Maybe I have a visual aid to support you as you construct your own understanding. Step 4 is that whole class review, where you share different trends that you observed. You also can have kids do a gallery walk. Let me go back to another pause and process strategy that I love, that small group. So after you have the input, the introduction of new learning, I like to give a large sheet of poster paper, and in groups of 4 around a table, I have them draw 4 triangles, or they make a line at the diagonal line to make 4 triangles on the 4 edges of the paper. And so this could be students working on creating new sentences. This could be students reading a short narrative or fictional text, whatever it is, but allowing individual processing of whatever the task is. And then they have to all come together and in the center, create understanding together based off what they've individually processed. It's so amazing. You can also, during that whole class review, and this is all before I give any form of an exit ticket. How dare I assess kids and give them a grade? You do not have to evaluate everything that you assign, but you do want to provide feedback and allow students to practice más y más with feedback before you give this letter grade. And again, the output can be creative. We do not want them only to do traditional fill in the blanks, multiple choice. We have to do that because they have to know tests are still structured as such. But what else can you do creatively so that they can transfer those skills? Maybe give them some cognates, maybe give them some additional vocabulary that you have not studied, but see if they can input that, interweave it into their understanding, right? This is going to increase more of this independent thinker versus dependent learners. Ahora vamos a practicar. So now let's get to some practice. I'm going to teach you all, and hopefully you all are able to scan and contribute to Padlet, because it's going to be really cool. And there will be an upcoming giveaway, another plushie giveaway very soon. So I'm going to model for you all briefly how I would use Duolingo to teach this concept of Kiswahili to my learners. And I want to reiterate what Carol Ann Tomlinson said. Teaching mechanics without meaning is counter to the way humans learn. So if we are so focused on the vocab and the grammar, but we're not creating space for students to develop their own understanding, right? Then we're talking about humanizing the language learning experience. That's like almost anti-human. And we don't want to do that, right? We want to be inclusive for all the different ways that we process and learn. All right, so I'm about to turn on teacher mode, and this will be virtual teacher mode, which I teach online, like many of us have done during this pandemia. And I'm just going to briefly model. You'll see me pull my screen down so I can show you, and then afterwards I will show you what my processing paper looks like for one lesson in the Duolingo Swahili app or program.
Jessie,
Okay, okay, yes.
Sorry, just one thing in the chat.
Oh, yes, please.
Evelyn's asking, so you had said teaching mechanics without meaning is, and she had asked you to finish that little nugget of thought.
Oh, lo siento. I'm sorry. Again, so Carolyn Tomlinson said, teaching mechanics without meaning is counter to the way humans learn. So if we're just teaching grammar, and again, I know comprehensible input is a trend right now. There's always a trend. Cultural responsiveness, the term is a trend, but we have to actually embody this. We have to practice it. And you have to, as Henry Ford says, fail forward. You have to make failure, like that's part of el proceso, no? But if I'm just teaching this vocabulary and grammar without allowing my students to pause and make their own connections and honor the way that they make those connections too, affirm the way they make those connections with the intent of the connections are accurate. Like you don't want to be teaching about frutas y verduras, like fruits and vegetables, and it's like way somewhere else and it doesn't relate at all. But having this like content to self connections and supporting that, that's what we're talking about. It's not pro-human the way we learn if it's just isolated facts, right? Because how are we going to transfer that? We're able to transfer different skills because of the experiences we've had with those skills, right? So now when you introduce something new, you want to give them the opportunity to find connection with themselves. So I hope that answers it. If not, por favor, DM me, write another pregunta or comentario. I want us to honor our time and get into this strategy in action. So now I'm in teacher mode. Okay, chiquitos, vamos a aprender cómo decir cómo estás en Kiswahili. We're going to learn how to ask someone how they're doing in Kiswahili. Okay, chiquitos, repitan. Hujambo. 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 Chiquitos, repitan. Hujambo. Hujambo. Turn to your neighbor. On the count of 3, I want you to high five them on the count of 3. Moja, mbili, tatu. Hujambo. Hujambo. Okay, now let's do Wakanda forever. We don't want to shake hands and spread any coronavirus germs or anything else. On the count of 3, I want you to turn to your neighbor and say Hujambo with Wakanda forever, okay? Moja, mbili, tatu. Hujambo. And say it like you mean it. Say the way that you would ask someone how you're doing. Hujambo. Hujambo. And the way you respond. Point to yourself. A ti. Everyone say Mimi. I love that Mimi because that means I. And it says like Mimi. Mimi si jambo. Remember, we got to sprinkle that swag. We want to sound como las personas que habla Kiswahili en casa. We want to sound like the people who speak Kiswahili at home. Point to yourself. Everyone say Mimi si jambo. Mimi si jambo. Mimi si jambo. Perfectissimo. Okay, everybody. Now I want you to show and demonstrate what you just did. We learned how to ask someone hujambo, and then we know the response is Mimi si jambo. On the count of 3, I want you to turn to your neighbor, partner 1, partner uno, moja. You are going to say hujambo. Partner 2, mbili, you'll respond and say Mimi si jambo. Okay, let me go ahead and count us out. Moja mbili, moja mbili, moja mbili. Okay, if you're moja, levántate la mano. Moja. Bueno, si tú eres mbili, levántate la mano. Mbili. Okay, on the count of 3, I want moja, 1, to turn to mbili and to ask the question, hujambo? And mbili, number 2, you need to respond Mimi si jambo. Okay? Moja, mbili, tatu. Hujambo. Mimi si jambo. Muy bien, perfectísimo. Okay, everyone, now show what you know. I want you to scan that QR code, and I want you to record yourself saying, oh, I'm good, I'm well, which is Mimi si jambo. I want you to record yourself speaking with that swag, Mimi si jambo. Go. Time out, teacher time. So I want you all to actually do that. Go ahead and scan that code. And what's really cool about Padlet, again, you can do 5 Padlets a month. And it's free. I'm not saying spend más plata, right? But that is a resource. If you want to upgrade it, advocate, speak to your administrator. It's so amazing because you can have students immediately upload audio. They can upload images. They can upload text. They can upload videos. So let your students practice the process of the pronunciation. And next, we're going to go to the practicing with that tactile feedback of note-taking. All right? But I want to give you all 60 seconds. Un minuto, yo voy a ser callada. I'm going to shut my mouth for a moment. And I want you to record yourself saying, Mimi si jambo. And afterwards, we're going to randomly select a few individuals to get some duo plushies. I can't wait to see and watch you all pronounce this phrase, this brand new phrase, Mimi si jambo with swag. Again, swag is the ability to speak como una persona nativa, like a native speaker. Mimi si jambo. 30 more seconds. Ujambo. Mimi si jambo. Mimi si ujambo. Ujambo. Have we had any entries yet, Bridget, on Padlet? Mimi si jambo.
I don't think I can see, because it's your Padlet, I don't think I could see the entries.
If you scan it, you can see if anyone, it opens up the Padlet for everyone. And this was so cool about Padlet. Teachers, please utilize this amazing resource. I love QR codes. If your students have tablets, if they have Chromebooks, I know every school doesn't allow cell phones, so you want to follow the policies de tu escuela, no? But if you have Chromebooks, if you have Padlet, I love to just project on the board. Or if I try not to print out as much, but you can have it right there. As soon as the kids come in, they scan it and it opens them directly up to Padlet. It is so cool because it's like instant. There's no need for a login. And so that's really cool. So Bridget, were you able to pull it up and see any responses here?
Yeah, I see Haiti. Thanks, Haiti. Awesome. Yeah. So we have our one plushie given away now to Haiti. So make sure you send me a direct message so I can get you a plushie. And anyone else who would like to upload saying Mimi si jambo, Hujambo, Mimi si jambo, we'll get the second plushie. So awesome. I could be checking it as you move on too.
Awesome sauce. Thank you so much. Again, you can see how, like Haiti did, it's so easy to have people just scan, post. That's just part of my culture in my classes, whether it's virtual or in persona. Just get them in that habit. So now I'm going to go back to teacher mode and demonstrate the pause and process. That was an opportunity to pause and process and practice the speaking, Mimi si jambo. But now we're going to go back to teacher mode so that I can practice the processing, that tactile feedback that we want to capitalize on. Okay, back in teacher mode. Okay, chiquitos, vamos a revisar. Okay, everyone say Hujambo. Hujambo. We just learned that's how you say ¿Cómo estás? We just learned that's how you say how are you? Hujambo. Okay, let me make sure I can hear you. Hujambo. Muy bien. Now we know the way you say I'm well, I'm good, todo bien is Mimi si jambo. Chicos, repitan. Mimi si jambo. Okay, on the count of 3, I want to hear all of you say, I'm going to ask all of you, I want you to turn to your neighbor again and ask Hujambo. And I want everyone to respond back to say Mimi si jambo. Okay? Okay? Listos? Moja, mbili, tatu. Hujambo. Mimi si jambo. Muy bien. Now, chiquitos, vamos a escribir. Let's go ahead and write this out. So I'm going to ask everyone to write Hujambo with the question mark. And I'm doing the same. Hujambo. Hujambo. Now, what I notice right here is Hujambo, and then I'm going to go ahead and draw una flecha, draw my arrow, because I know once this phrase is spoken, Hujambo, next I'm going to have a response, which is Mimi si jambo. Mimi si jambo. So everyone, you can see I have a mi papelito. Hujambo. Mimi si jambo. And as I'm processing this, now all of a sudden I'm starting to make a connection. I see jambo is both there. So I'm going to go ahead and put a rectangle around. Go ahead, everyone else, add a rectangle around jambo. Because I see in both the question and the response that I have jambo. But I notice it's a difference. We have Mimi, si, for I, and we learned earlier, chiquitos, the way you say I'm, plus your name is Mimi ni Jessica, Mimi ni Bob, Mimi ni Billy. right? So I see this is a pattern. I'm making that connection. Everybody, let's go ahead right underneath that. And let's go ahead and write me, me, me in our name, because we learned that yesterday in class. So let's make that connection with that. Right underneath this, I'm going to go ahead and write me, 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 Jessica. I want everyone to write me, me, me in your name. So now I'm making that connection. I can build on that because we learned yesterday, that's how you say I'm plus our name. We learned a formal way, Gino Lango ni Jessica. We also learned the informal way, Mimi ni Jessica. So I know this Mimi relates to me. But then I noticed in the question, it says, who Jambo? Even though I respond, Mimi si Jambo. So under this who, everybody, I'm going to go ahead. You know what? I want to underline that who. And for me, I think of the phrase, who is like you? That's how I'm going to remember it. Who is like you? That who is like you? Who is like you? Who? I know that who is a pronunciation for WHO, and the who is a pronunciation in Kiswahili at the beginning. I'm also, you know what, I think I like to draw two hands because, you know, when you meet someone, oop, forgive me for that ugly looking hand, but I'm asking someone like, ¿Cómo estás, hujambo? And the person responds and says, Mimi si jambo. And I think with that Mimi si jambo, I also want to draw a smiley face with a thumbs up, because apparently the person's doing well if you say Mimi si jambo. It doesn't mean you're in a bad mood. This means you're in a good mood. Mimi si jambo. And I'm going to draw a thumbs up. Okay, pause. This is just one representation. I want you all to see what my actual, I would use a web camera. I normally have a separate camera up that's logged in. So, because sometimes it's fun to draw on a computer, sometimes not so much. But this is what, oh, I'm sorry. This is what my actual notes looks like. This is for me. These are my actual processing. It's my actual processing paper of me learning these phrases from one lesson. This is what I'm talking about, whether you have your students but you have to model this first. You can have your students. We always think about, well, do we give extra homework? I know we give the XP for completion. You know, I may create a separate exit ticket, but you want to create this where students get in the habit of, hey, en la clase de mandarín, en francés, español, alemán, árabe, in this language class, we process, we pause, and we process. And the cultural responsiveness is there will be some colloquial phrases that your students use that you yourself may not use when you're expressing yourself, right, in your native language. And if it relates and connects to this, you want to probe that thinking so they can make the connection. That's that understanding. For example, I wrote down here, this is just me. I wrote, no worries, todo bien. Obviously, I'm incorporating the Spanish for me, right? Mimi si jambo, todo bien, no worries, si jambo, Mimi si jambo. Over here, later on, I learned ham jambo. The ham versus who means you all. And I was thinking, y'all good? Now, I would not say y'all good in a professional setting per se. I would say that with mi familia, with my cousins, with some little children in a very informal setting, y'all good? But I'm making that connection with ham jambo, you know, and then like different phrases, drawings, doodling, connections. Let your students process. Let them construct their own understanding with you to facilitate it and be their guide. Also in the bottom left corner, I always have my students write those questions, write those wonderings. And the wonderings may not be solved to where it's correct how you think. Like I wrote down there, in Swahili, are verb conjugations at the start or like a prefix? Are nouns or pronouns at the start? So I'm asking these questions. And maybe when I do a turn and talk and share, or the gallery walk, or as my teacher's going around, this person can help me construct that meaning. So I wanted to do a brief reflection, and I can't wait to see some of your responses about this concept of like including more time for pause and processing with the teacher feedback, but more so the teacher questioning and probing, right? So we have one more Padlet, and if you want to type it in the Facebook chat book or use Padlet, todo está bien. The question is, how can you incorporate more pause and process opportunities in your lesson design? And I really like using this word design instead of lesson planning, because design is like very active. Design thinking is using metacognition, is thinking about your thinking. It's making considerations that if I'm just creating a quick plan, it's not the same. So I would love to hear some of your responses, Bridget, if anyone shared already on the chat book or on the chat box or in Padlet. How can you incorporate more pause and process in opportunities in your lesson design?
Not seeing anything yet. There was a question earlier though,
Yes.
from Pamela. Jessie, do you have them write in a notebook or do you give them a graphic organizer / worksheet page?
I love, me encanta la pregunta. I love that question. Thank you so much, Bridget, for sharing. So this year, I'm going to do something totally different than what I've done before. And I like taking risks because this is where we are really like in the field. We say the field of education, but you are in the field. You are, every year you gain more field experience, right? So you have to practice and try things. Previously, it took a lot of time with the traditional, like, I shouldn't say traditional, the initial way of interactive notebooks where I was like typing out vocabulary sheets, having them cut and paste. Sometimes I do that, but not necessarily. When it comes to the processing, and let me clarify, the pause and process is separate from when students still need to practice their penmanship and practice writing their vocabulary words or actually doing a worksheet. This is not to take the place of a worksheet. This may be a 5-minute pause. It may be 10 minutos. It may be independently, but what I do is I like to do one of two things. One, I give blank sheets of paper, like copy paper. I have the kids hole punch it, and then they have a binder. But this year, what I'm requiring my students to do is, and every school district's different. I work in an independent setting, so I kind of like say what the materials are, and we either get donations or parents purchase it. But I want students to use like a sketch pad or a blank notebook. If they have to use a composition book with lines, está bien. But I don't know, for some people, the way we process, we need this blank canvas. And again, you can have students use Canva. They can use Jamboard. They can use Padlet to express, but the processing to get that tactile feedback, it needs to happen on paper, right? And allowing students to practice with it and to share. That's what's really awesome, because there's power in like this, ¿cómo se llama? We vicariously learn, so we can vicariously understand too. And so like having a gallery walk after you've said, okay, ustedes tienen 5 minutos, you got 5 minutes para procesar lo que acabamos de aprender, and giving them the opportunity, and then maybe doing a gallery walk or a trade and learn instead of trade and grade. Trade and observe, right? And that's an awesome opportunity too.
Amazing, thank you. We do have some things being shared in the chat. Having students draw the scene after you TPRS a story. Love that. Have a timer to remind you to stop a question, and then set a time period open for questioning and processing. Don't move on until after the student, after the time is up, to ensure all students have time to process so they know what the time is for. Amazing. Yes. Awesome. And then lastly, we have, this is reminding me of whole brain teaching, which I've been learning about more this summer. One technique is to break learning into small chunks, having students do gestures along with the teacher, then turn into pairs and teach that material, repeating the gestures.
Absolutely. All of that, all of what you all just said, estoy de acuerdo. Those are all amazing strategies for holding yourself accountable and actually implementing this pause and process. And I would say it's really good if whether you use paper, like loose leaf paper, composition notebook, sketch pad, however you do it, have the students keep it organized so that they can refer back to it. That is an amazing thing. And I did not even talk about, Bridget, because I know we have our time. We did not even talk about introversion versus extroversion. We need to stop talking about someone's an extrovert or an introvert. It's more about what is your preference? What is like organic for you in the way that you process things? I prefer extroversion. Extroversion means I like to get my thoughts out. You can even have a pause and process time where if you, whether you do it through testing or just through observation or polling, there's some kids that want to, they feed off the energy of others that just need to express themselves. There are some kids I have found, I remember always doing a daily prompt for my primeramente activity when kids would come in and maybe a drill and practice and maybe a quote. I promise you, when I would say, okay, let's do a mini class discussion, the students who raise their hand, they know to like initially like really want to share out. When I would collect their worksheets, like their journal prompting weekly worksheets, I promise you, those students who were very expressive verbally, they oftentimes did not have that much written down. But the students who may not have been the first ones to raise their hand, and we've been in this crazy twilight thinking culture of if you don't raise your hand, that means you're not paying attention or you're not participating. I've had so many students that prefer introversion that have amazing responses on paper. I mean, paragraph responses of processing the prompts. And so you also want to take in consideration maybe having an area for students where and allowing them, that's being inclusive. Culturally responsive is so much more than what we see tangibly with students. It's also how students process and learn culturally and individually, right? It's an amazing thing to allow students to do this pause and process in addition to the practice, in addition, interwoven with feedback, CFUs, all of what you all mentioned. So I just want to give you a few announcements, and then if there are any additional preguntas, questions, feel free to ask me. One is I have a free upcoming live workshop, Hook 'em with a Beat, and it is free for Spanish language educators, French teachers, German teachers can join too, but all of the examples of musical mnemonics that will be the focus of the workshop will be in Espanol. Again, it is free. If you want to get the ebook that goes with it or have a year access to the lyric book and the videos, that's an additional cost, but the workshop itself is gratis. Visit jessiefeliz.com. That's where I house all my materials. Also, I'm super duper excited for our upcoming fall language teacher study group. We are going to be really digging deep in cultural responsiveness, class culture, cognitive engagement, intentional lesson design, implementation, and reflection. We'll be meeting for 7 weeks. And it's a relatively small cohort. I never take more than 25 personas, no more than 25 individuals. There will be, because again, it's field experience. Everything we talk about, you will implement it in sus clases, in sus aulas, and bring it back for discussion, and that we can like make it come to life, right? So I'm super duper excited. Again, visit jessiefeliz.com to learn more about that. And I'm leaving this last one up. You can join my Jessie Feliz teacher email list so we can stay connected. And it's about us all learning, laughing, and growing together. I've been teaching for más de 14 años, for more than 14 years, and there's still so much to learn. And I'm not saying I don't want anyone to be overwhelmed and I have to learn every single thing and implement every single thing all the time. No, that's not realistic. We are humanizing the language learning experience for our students, but we also need to humanize this language, this learning experience como language professors ourselves, profesores. So if you have any additional questions, Bridget, you could let me know in the chat box. So
Yes, yeah, we have. Yep, we do have one question. Jessie, would you please talk about introversion, extroversion, and how the silent period might affect that? And so are you saying that the students who write is regardless of the silent period or in conjunction with it?
So, buena pregunta. Everyone, whether you prefer extroversion or introversion, everyone needs time to process new information on paper. So whether I'm using a Duolingo app with my whole group to guide instruction, or individually, or if I'm using, the curriculum, district provided curriculum, or my own, everyone has to pause and process. You need to honor that time on paper, because for understanding and making those meaningful connections, the brain is something with the eye, brain, pencil, hand coordination that only happens from note taking, even the doodling, if it relates, but not just random doodling all day long, but if it relates to the input of information. When we're talking about the extroversion versus introversion, in addition to this, you may have a small group of students who prefer extroversion. And it's like, you know what? Let's have a mini discussion together. Let's talk about this together out loud, where you're facilitating that conversation. And maybe you group those students together where they prefer. If you have not heard of Myers-Briggs, I love MBTI. Part of my fall cohort will be included, everyone doing the full assessment, because it really digs deep into how your preferences for processing stress, just life in general, and new information. And there's free assessments you can do with your students. And it's so cool because oftentimes we focus on just our label. Oh, I'm an ESTJ, or I'm an INST, but it's more so like, how do we extract from that how we process? And so there's some people, I got to get it out. But I learned from an amazing instructional coach manager. His name was Colin O'Neill from Texas. He would say, Jessica, get it out, but there's a time and place for, like, obviously speaking, but put it on paper. I never forget he would tell me that. Just get it out. I'm also a dancer. It makes sense. I love to dance because I love to express myself, and specifically lyrical. I love to express, to get it out. My sister, she's a Sagittarius. She's a civil engineer. She's an analytical thinker. She prefers introversion. And then when she speaks, she's been the person that has been quiet, and she's mapping out the whole task, while I'm got to speak it out. But we still can come together. And then when she speaks, it's like, actually, I think you should do A, B, C, D. And I'm like, oh. So you want to have that opportunity and give students those opportunities, because we want to develop independent thinkers, not just have dependent learners. I'm dependent on this. No, I want you to cultivate your understanding on your own so you can transfer those skills. Any other preguntas?
Thanks, Jessie. We do have one more question, but I want to pose my last question for the plushie giveaway, so everyone has some chance to kind of reflect and then you could answer that question. How does that sound?
Perfectissimo.
Okay, perfect. So the question for the last plushie giveaway is, share with us in the chat one big takeaway from Jessie's wonderful presentation. So share with us what is a big takeaway that you got from this, and we'll hopefully be implementing in your classroom. So I'll give you a chance to kind of reflect. No rush, because I won't choose the person live. Okay, so really reflect and take your time to write, but I just want to get it out there. And so then 15 minutes later or so, I'll comment who is the winner for that, right? And I'll reach out. But last question, Jessie, do you have a time limit for the silence period?
Yes, I do. Because we still have a 42-minute class, right? Or a 55-minute, or a block schedule. If we were I worked at one school one time, and I loved that, here in Detroit, Michigan. And I loved that instead of calling it like classroom A27, the rooms were called learning studios. I just love in learning labs. I love that concept, like that we're doing this experiment and experience all together in teaching and learning. At the same time, if we were in a situation where we had this infinite amount of tiempo, to do really dig deep and without the bell ringing, all that stuff, then yeah, it would be a different scenario. Pero We still have to be mindful of the context of the schools that we teach in, right? We still have to, all of what I like to share with people, when it comes from Spanish swag to pause and process to digging deeper with cognitive engagement, none of this takes place of what you're already doing that works. This is just digging deeper. So if you get into practice, it may even be like, maybe you have your lesson set up where Mondays, I've done it before, sometimes where Mondays, introduction to new material, and we're processing throughout the week. So maybe it's that initial process, and maybe then it's practicing, then maybe I introduce some additional vocabulary that relates. You know, you have to think about it. Friday's the official assessment, but I learned if I wait till Friday to assess students and I have not given them opportunities to process with feedback, practice with feedback, and then I turn around and give them an assessment, I'm not doing my students well. You need to informally assess your students throughout. And so even during that silent period, when you're walking around, not at your desk, but you're walking around, and again, there are times where you are at your desk. I'm not saying you have to be walking around all the time, but that processing component is so important to circulate so you can make observations. You can also see trends. The trends may tell you during that silent time, you know what? Maybe I need to reteach because I'm seeing that 50% of my students are not grasping this concept. So you have to be the decider of how much time, but honor that time. And even for us that prefer extroversion, we still need that silent time as well. And so it's just like, really, you're cultivating your class culture, and part of your culture needs to be, hey, we pause and we process.
Amazing. Thank you. We have a lot of really positive comments.
I can't wait to read them.
Yes. Talking about how much they love your enthusiasm, which I remember when I saw that presentation a month ago that you had invited me to, I thought the same thing. Your enthusiasm is off the charts. I love it. A lot of people saying they wrote down a lot of several nuggets they're going to take away. Thank you. Everyone keep sharing for that last plushie giveaway in the comments. Tell us what's your big takeaway from this session. I'm sure both Jessie and I, we're going to be in the comments too. So thank you so much, everyone. And thank you to you, Jessie. Thank you for being here with us. Really appreciate it.
Yes, I'm so thankful to be part of the network. And you all, one of my biggest takeaways, I keep want to like push us all to do this. Duolingo has created this amazing app, right? I think so many of us have used it primarily for independent learning, whether it's homework over the summer, or we all get on the Chromebooks and do Duolingo individually. If that works with your flow, está bien. Model for your students how to process, how to pause and process during the learning process, during and after. Also, a big takeaway or giveaway, I want my version of a giveaway, it's not a plushie, sorry, Bridget. Not as cool as Bridget, but one more swagalicious giveaway I want to offer is try this out. If you have like a separate account that you would have to create, like a different email address, project the lesson, the same lesson that the kids will work on independently, project it on the board and go through how you would process the material yourself. That's humanizing it. You're modeling metacognition, how you think about your thinking while you're thinking. And that's an amazing thing to do. So I just wanted to share that. I cannot emphasize it enough. I will, when I get started back with my classes, I will definitely, Bridget, be filming as much as I can, because I really want to show this pause and process with the world. So buenas noches a todos, or buenas tardes, depende de donde está ubicado en el mundo.
Amazing.
And yes, I'll be reading all the comments and questions shortly.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you, everyone. We will see you in the Educators Network. Have a great night, everyone. Bye.
Ciao.